Hello and welcome to another episode of Maritime Mishaps, the channel that investigates the most interesting, tragic, and often bizarre stories from the sea. The claustrophobia, stress, and pressure associated with submarines is often portrayed in films such as Crimson Tide and The Hunt for Red October to dramatic effect. And though such emotions can be considered natural, most individuals aboard such vessels are relatively calm and extremely professional. Unfortunately, the conditions that submarines themselves are built to navigate and endure can easily lead one to panic, or in some cases, spark a full-scale war. For the crew of the KRI Nanggala 402, it would appear that the simplest of technical issues would result in disaster and tragedy after the submarine was declared missing on the 21st of April 2021. During a routine drill, the Nanggala would stray off course and into the void of the Bali Sea, where Colonel Harry Setyawan, his 49 crew members, and 3 weapons specialists would perish. Any and all attempts at rescue by the Indonesian Navy would be in vain, as the remnants of the ship would be discovered just 3 days later, and 12 miles from the last point of contact. So, what exactly happened that day in 2021? Where did it all go wrong? What lessons were learned? And was there a conspiracy at the heart of it all? Join us on this episode of Maritime Mishaps as we attempt to answer these questions and unravel the tragic end of the KRI Nanggala. As ever, before we decipher the facts, timeline, and aftermath of the disaster, we must first understand what the 402 was in terms of its militarized operations, as well as a brief history of its exercises and general specifications. In 1959, Indonesia became the first Southeast Asian country to conduct operations with submarine ships after obtaining them from the Soviet Union. These were the RI Chakra and the RI Nanggala. This purchase allowed the country to emphasize and restructure its naval framework, and so, on July 6, 1981, the KRI Chakra 401 and KRI Nanggala 402 were ordered to replace the Whiskey-class Soviet submarines that were originally being used. The Nanggala 402 had an electric diesel engine, which produced 4,600 horsepower per shaft. She weighed in at 1,395 tons and measured 59.5 meters by 6.3 meters by 5.5 meters. Her ammunition included 14 21-inch torpedoes and 8 AEG-made tubes, with targeting via Zeiss-made periscopes positioned next to the machine and bow Gabler snorkel. An impressive vessel indeed. However, 30 years later, tragedy would strike, leaving a trail of questions as well as the bodies of all those aboard the KRI Nanggala 402. At the time of her disappearance, there were a total of 53 people on board, 49 of which were crew members alongside 3 weapons specialists and 1 commander. On the 21st of April 2021, Air Chief Marshal Hadi Tjujanto, commander of the Indonesian National Armed Forces, first proclaimed that the submarine was missing and suspected to have disappeared approximately 95 kilometers north of Bali. Afterwards, Navy spokesperson First Admiral Julius Wijonjo noted that the ship had been in the process of torpedo drill exercises, but did not report their findings back to their base. According to the Navy sources, the last known contact with members of the crew was at 4:25 a.m., after the commanding officer had given permission for the deployment of a torpedo. A report declared that Nanggala had fired a live torpedo and a practice torpedo before communication was lost. At 9:37 a.m., a distress signal was sent to the International Submarine Escape and Rescue Liaison Office. Initial assumptions were that the submarine had lost power and plummeted to depths of approximately 700 meters. After word began to spread, a sense of panic ensued as calculations on the oxygen reserves meant that the crew aboard the submarine would have less than 2 days left before they ran out of air. The story became front-page news and was escalated to the president of Indonesia. Joko Widodo publicly declared that the rescue and safety of the Nanggala 402 was of the utmost importance and requested the public pray for those on board. After the initial announcement that the submarine had gone missing, the Indonesian Navy sent a total of 3 warships to search the area of an apparent oil spill that was detected by aerial reconnaissance earlier that morning. The KRI Raden Edi Martadanata, KRI I Gusti Negara Rai, and KRI Diponegoro were dispatched in the hopes of detecting and potentially making contact with a missing ship. Calls for the help by neighboring countries such as Singapore and Australia were answered, and so the search was well and truly on. Divers were deployed from the warships to do manual deep-sea checks on the area where the Nanggala was presumed to have dived. On the 22nd of April, the Navy confirmed that the oil spill was wider than first assumed, but that one of the warships, the Raden Edi Martadanata, had detected movement. Another frigate had seemingly picked up on the signal of an object, which was moving at a slow speed underwater at a depth of 100 meters, according to Admiral Yudo Margono, Chief Staff of the Indonesian Navy. Margono wasted no more time in deploying a further 21 warships, 5 airplanes, 3 submarines, and 6 additional ships to help with the search. The KRI Dr. Saharso, KRI Hassan Basri, KRI Karel Satsudaban, KRI Singa, KRI Hugh, and KRI Liang were a last roll of the dice by the Navy in the hopes of finding the vessel, and those on board alive. More news came that the KRI Rigel warship was expected to join the rescue attempt by the 23rd of April. This was equipped with state-of-the-art sonar equipment and would be paramount to the mission's success. More help arrived when the Republic of Singapore's Navy dispatched their MC Swift rescue submarine, and the Royal Malaysian Navy rerouted its MV Megabakti to the area. By then, the news of the Nanggala 402 and its crew had spread worldwide, and so the United States got involved. Press Secretary John Kirby announced that airborne assistance in the form of the P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft was being sent to help widen the search. By the time the 23rd of April arrived, the Indonesian National Police had positioned 4 of their own ships with remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, and sonar devices, and Australian Fleet Commander Rear Admiral Mark Hammond announced that HMAS Ballarat and HMAS Sirius would assist in the mission as time was certainly running out. Eventually, on April 24, 2021, the worst-case scenario was realized, as the Indonesian Navy declared that mechanical debris had been located. This included torpedo tube parts, a coolant pipe insulator, a bottle of periscope grease, and prayer rugs. The location of the fragments was said to be found within 10 nautical miles of the last point of contact that had been made with the submarine. And as there were no other ships in the area at the time, it was finally declared that the Nanggala 402 had unfortunately sunk and perished. Sonar detection scans confirmed that the submarine had plummeted to a depth of 850 meters, and its crush depth was presumed to be 500 meters. The next day, the Indonesian Navy confirmed that the Nanggala had imploded and that all 53 crew members and personnel on board had died. More scans were able to locate and recognize various parts of the submarine structure and mechanical components, including rudder, diving plane, anchor, and external parts of the pressure hull, as well as items such as an Mk-11 submarine escape suit. From this point onwards, the news continued to flood in, and only seemed to get worse as the ROV Super Spartan from the MV Swift Rescue of the Singapore Navy reported that visual scans showed that the submarine had split into 3 separate parts. The confusion, dread, and horror that those on board must have endured as the Nanggala sank to the depths of the sea must have been terrifying, to say the least. Now that the location, verification, and declaration of the submarine's demise was concluded, the actual cause of the disaster was still to be confirmed. Investigations began, and reports were thoroughly analyzed and debated. However, the Navy advised that the working assumption was that the Nanggala had developed a crack in its structure after suffering some type of power outage. This loss of power was believed to have occurred due to an electrical fuse blowout. Yet, after parts of debris were examined, Yudo Margono declared an explosive power outage would have been detected by sonar. Tubagus Hasanuddin, an Indonesian legislator and retired major general, believes that the refitting of the vessel by the South Korean firm Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering, or DSME, back in 2012 may have been the root cause of the structural failure. Mr. Hasanuddin stated that the submarine had failed a torpedo firing test after the refit was carried out, a failure that resulted in the deaths of 3 people. He went on to say that it had exceeded its design capacity, meaning that it was only supposed to hold a total of 38 crew members, not 53. However, after the refit was carried out and a further 8 years went by, the vessel was still deemed to be in good working condition, meaning another set of repair works was not prioritized or required. This unfortunate and incompetent oversight and neglect would no doubt have an impact on the structure, functionality, and capabilities of the Nanggala submarine and can easily be linked to its destruction. It uncovered a lack of knowledge, awareness, and health and safety for the crew and the vessel itself. The tragedy also exposed the vulnerability in the Indonesian maritime defenses, as the country had only 5 submarines in operation before the sinking, all of which covered an area of approximately 3.2 million kilometers. A country with such a vast marine territory should have had a minimum of 12 submarines at their disposal, according to experts. But a 2019 audit of all defense equipment concluded that only 50% of their arsenal was suitable for use. As with every maritime disaster, the possibility of a conspiracy or cover-up is normally discussed, or at least considered, by members of the public as well as the authorities employed to investigate. One of the key factors in the debate and conversation surrounding the sinking of the Nanggala 402 was China, a country considered to be one of the world's biggest superpowers when it comes to technology, economics, and militarized stockpiling. China has never been a defense industrial partner to Indonesia, and though they are relatively close neighbors, they have not provided them with any meaningful equipment or militarized arms. This is despite the fact that, more than 20 years ago, China pledged to assist in the construction of Indonesia's defense industry, including a 2011 Memorandum of Understanding on Joint Missile Production. This disregard, coupled with the continuous global threat from China as dominant players on the world stage, led many to point out that, before the sinking of the submarine, China had orchestrated naval maneuvers deep into the South China Sea conflict zone. On April 6, 2021, the Philippine military detected 200 ships from China entering their EEZ territory. Indonesia also recorded multiple vessels entering their waters without notification or fear of consequence. This has naturally roused tensions between the countries and can easily be linked to the sinking of the Nanggala 402, especially if one views the scenario from a historical and conspiracy theory angle. Weirdly, however, is that the Chinese naval fleet expressed their desire to negotiate with Indonesia. They even participated in the rescue team of Indonesia's submarine recovery missions. Many believe that this will likely make communication between both countries more stable and transparent moving forward. Time will tell on this. Unfortunately, any talk of diplomacy, political allegiances, or naval partnerships does not change the fact that 53 people died that day, April of 2021. That the vessel those crew members were aboard should have been fully functional and operational. Questions were rightfully posed and, as usual, many were not answered. This has led to conspiracy theories and all sorts of guesses as to what and why this happened. I guess we will never truly know for certain. On April 26th, the Indonesian government awarded posthumous promotions to everyone aboard the ship, a small gesture that was meant to honor their sacrifice. Let us hope that nothing like this happens again, and that the need for such submarines and their operations is minimal as we look to the future.